Hey guys, welcome back. This is Sebastian, and you are watching my conversion story to the Orthodox Church. It's about time. First of all, this video is brought to you by the Dunder Mifflin Paper Company. And secondly, before I get into the story, I was recording a video that I was supposed to be putting out before this one. But then about 40 something minutes in, my phone died and the recording was deleted. So that video is now in the ether, in the unknown, and it will never see the light of day. Sorry guys. But anyway, I'm going to be talking about my conversion to Orthodoxy. It's going to get a little personal. I'm going to get into details pretty much every step along the way. From Roman Catholicism to agnosticism to New Ageism, a consideration of reverting back to Catholicism, and then somewhere along the line ending up where I am now. So I'll get into the detail. And I think what a lot of people are going to find is that they can relate on a lot of levels to what I'm about to tell you guys. So here we go. I was born into a Roman Catholic family, raised Roman Catholic nominally. So what happens, which is something that is very common in the Hispanic American community, is that the Roman Catholic faith is not taken as seriously as it should. And what happens is you become very nominal, very lukewarm. It's cultural Catholicism. You go to Easter services, you go to Christmas services, and that's it. The sacraments are not taken very seriously, at least from where I came from, right? I'm not talking about all of Roman Catholicism. So what ended up happening was I got baptized as a child, infant. I did my first communion. And then I told my mother that I did not want to continue going to church. And she consented. She was okay with it. I was more concerned about playing basketball and football with my friends, or baseball, whatever it may be. And she was perfectly fine with it, regrettably. So I come from a single parent household. And my father would come around every now and then, maybe a birthday, special occasions. And he was a Jehovah's Witness. Now, actually, let me put a pause on this before anyone tries to, in bad faith, psychologize what I'm about to say or psychoanalyze me. The relationship that I had with my parents at 12, 13, 14, 15 years old is not the same relationship that I have with my parents now as a 27-year-old grown man, right? So for all the young bucks out there watching, part of growing up means that you have to reconcile with your parents, that you have to not only forgive your parents, but also ask for forgiveness and build a healthy relationship with them. So I just wanted to throw that out there. We're okay. I honor my father and my mother. I love them both very, very much. I'm just telling my story. That's all it is. So, but this is important, right? Because my father, as a Jehovah's Witness, who I already had some kind of resentment towards for not being there in my life, really affected my view of anything that was foreign to me, basically anything that is non-Catholic. It put a very bad taste in my mouth, because my father would come around every so often and he would try to convert me to his Jehovah's Witness faith. And I was like, dude, you're not even here. Why should I believe what you believe, right? This is why it's important to have a double parent household that is stable in the same faith. All right, you want to avoid confusion. So anyway, now the combination of my separation from the Roman Catholic faith with my mother's consent, plus my father's Jehovah's Witness faith and barely coming around, that led me into a very soft atheism or agnosticism or just an overall indifference towards God, basically. And again, I have already a bad taste of anything non-Catholic because of my father, right? So I say that to say this, that during I think it was my 14th or 15th birthday, I had a family friend who invited me to his evangelical Protestant service. And this was my first experience with Protestantism, in, low church Protestantism. And so immediately, about 5 minutes into the service, I was confused. It's already unfamiliar. I'm already indifferent towards God. And immediately, I felt there was something off. It legitimately felt like a scam, right? I'm just telling you how I felt. During the service, a woman comes up to me. She places her hands on my head, and she tries, like a medium, I don't know what she thought she was doing, but she was trying to read my mind and tell me about myself. And as a 14, 15-year-old, I'm like, this is a waste of my time. Why am I here? It's a joke. The music is loud and boisterous. It's obnoxious. People are all over the place. And it was just complete chaos. Completely the opposite of what I knew, even though I wasn't strong in what I knew. But it was unfamiliar, and therefore I didn't want anything to do with it. So fast forward, so about 14, 15 years old, all the way to about 19 years old, I go through a phase of not just rejecting God, but just completely and consciously hating him. And about the age 19, I'm already in the military. So what happens is I graduate at 17. I leave my home. I join the military. And around 18, 19, more so 19, I start looking for an escape from the stresses of the military life. And if you've been in the military, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Specifically, if you've been in the Marine Corps, then you definitely know what I'm talking about. A lot of people become alcoholics. A lot of people, they fall into things. And one of the things that I fell into was yoga. Okay, so meditation. I resorted to Kundalini yoga and chakra meditations, and I went as far as to experiment with astral projection. So I was very into this stuff, and this was my way of coping with the stresses of the military life. And so at that time, I thought that all of these things were filling a void that was in me. And eventually, what ends up happening is, with months of this chakra meditation, with months of this yoga, I end up combining these meditations with cough medicine. So I start experimenting with drugs, specifically cough medicines that have high dosage of DXM, which, I don't know if you're familiar, but it's also known as robo-tripping. So what I would do was I would robo trip, but also do these meditations and all this yoga, meditation, whatever it is. And so, which is weird, right? Why is it that people that are involved in that stuff always have another issue, right? Whether it's drugs or a very hedonistic lifestyle. It's always the case. It's like almost always the case. And I can attest to that. I was there. I lived it. It's weird. It's demonic. That's why. But anyway, moving on. So here's where it's about to get weird, if it hasn't already for you. With all this overdosage on DXM and the meditation and the yoga, I have a spiritual experience, quote unquote spiritual. Well, no, not, it was actually spiritual, but it was demonic. It was very real, but it was demonic, right? Very, very real. And what ends up happening is I have a vision, and so I'm going to go into detail what I saw. I was laying in bed and my eyes were closed and I was meditating, but I was also high on drugs. And so what I saw in the beginning was a blue-skinned woman with cables attached to her head, and she had her eyes closed. Eventually, in the middle of her forehead, her third eye, so to speak, opens. And all of a sudden, I'm transported to a different place in my mind. And what I have in front of me is a gigantic wall of eyes. And these eyes are all connected with muscle tissue. It's crazy. It's crazy. I can remember it just like super vividly. They were held together with muscle tissue, and it was thousands and thousands of eyes. And this gigantic wall cracks in the middle, and this wall becomes now a door, and it starts opening and opening slowly, slowly, slowly. The more it opens, the brighter the light gets that's behind it. And obviously, in retrospect, looking back, it's very clear that that is not the uncreated light of God, right? That is a demonic light, satanic light. But it's very real. It's very real what that experience is, right? And so I step into this extremely bright light, and immediately I come to, right? I wake up, and at the time, the way that I interpreted it, that experience was that I had achieved some kind of enlightenment that no one else had achieved. So immediately, a 19-year-old has fallen into pre-lust, spiritual delusion, just like that, right? Just as you would expect. And the weird thing about this so-called enlightenment or illumination or spiritualism that I thought I was getting, the weird thing about that is that I was not changing for the better in any way. In fact, my hedonism was getting worse. I was living even more recklessly, and initially what I thought was an escape from stresses was just a Band-Aid on a terrible wound, right? It wasn't going to fix anything. The void is not filled. So I eventually realized that this self-idolatry is not filling the void, and it's basically a waste of time. So I start investing a little bit less time in it over time. And eventually I just lose interest altogether. So fast forward to the age of about 21, I'm now out of the military. and I'm already in a serious relationship, and I end up getting married to my wife, who I'm still with. And she comes from a Pentecostal background. I'll just leave that there for now. So the void is not being filled, right? So I'm looking for it elsewhere. Where do I find it? This is where we get into the forbidden topic of politics. Coffee break. So I get out of the military and I go to college, and I'm not going into college with already an expectation of how liberal it might be. I had no idea. I was indifferent, in fact, to the political climate. But the more I was going to class, the more I realized that there was something inherently just putting me off, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I remember it was a lot of feminism being pushed, and not the tolerable kind. Actually, there is no tolerable kind. Even first wave feminism is a mistake. But it was the kind that was like openly bashing men. And I was like, is this right? I mean, I'm not paying for this. The VA is paying for it, right? But I'm in here. And this is really annoying, right? So not only was it just like feminism and stuff like that, but it was like really like this, they're pushing this idea of like this anything goes type of moral relativism. And I'm just like, this is weird. I don't know how to put it, but it's really bothering me. And so over time, I would say about my second year into college, I start noticing that there's a pretty universal and organized agenda going on here against everything that is remotely traditional and morally conservative. And I start beginning to ask myself, why? And in my history courses, even as a non-believer, right? I'm nothing at this point. At least, I don't think I am at this point. In my history courses, I find myself writing papers and essays defending moral objectivism and the dangers of secularism, nihilism, hedonism. I don't know why, right? But I am at this point, by God's providence, perhaps. So I begin to ask myself, who are the historical enemies of this traditionalism that I feel that I like, you know? I'm starting to become sympathetic towards traditionalism. And I begin asking myself, who are the historical enemies of this traditionalism, of this moral objectivism, social conservatism? At the same time, because I'm a history major, I start learning about the relationship between Christians and other people groups. For example, Muslims and the J words, and just Western civilization in general. Keep in mind, Western civilization. Keep that in mind, right? Because I feel like that's a big stumbling block. And I'll go into that in a little bit. That was good. So, I start realizing that Western civilization is made what it is because of the Christian faith, not because of someone's ethnic background, not because of someone's DNA, but because of the Christian faith. That is what made Western civilization what it was, or so I thought. Really what made Western civilization is the Enlightenment. But, and humanism. Moving on. So, I have a classmate. I start becoming sympathetic towards Christianity now, and not any specific kind, just in general, sympathetic towards it. And I have a classmate who tells me that if I want to revert to Christianity, then I have to go back to the original Christianity. And this stuck in my mind even to this day. It'll never leave me. And this classmate was not religious. They were just a student that knew that I was looking into this stuff, and they're like, hey, I mean, if you're thinking about becoming Christian, just become the original Christian. What are they, right? So I kind of leave that on the back burner. I just leave it alone. It stays in my mind, but I don't really look into it that much. But what starts happening is my conservatism, so to speak, and I'll go into what I mean by that, but my social conservatism becomes a little more expressive. I become very open about my beliefs, and I begin to openly shill for the Republican Party, okay? Because this is what I think conservatism is at the time. American conservatism, patriotism, right? During the same time, or a little after, I discover 4chan / poll. So you can already see where I'm going here. I started watching YouTubers like Stefan Molyneux. I started watching not even right-wing people, just political people, Stick, Sex, and Hammer, Sargon of Akkad, Nick Fuentes, even people like Millennial Woes, who I didn't agree with, but I still would watch these kinds of people. Greg Johnson, Federal Agent Richard Spencer, all these guys, right? And so over time, I keep watching and consuming this stuff and poisoning my mind with / poll. I mean, let me just stop right there and say this. If you're an Orthodox Christian, or you're inquiring into it, or you're a catechumen in the church, the best thing you can do, let me tell you right now, is get off of 4chan. It will destroy you. But anyway, what happens is, I go from like this normie, very basic American conservatism to civic nationalism. Now I'm becoming more firm in the things that I believe. Now I don't believe people should have a choice. I don't believe in freedom of abortion. Why should you have the right to do that? Right now I'm openly fighting against what is objectively wrong. Okay, I become a civic nationalist. But even then, as you guys know, what does that mean, right? So that's exactly what happens. It means nothing. Civic nationalism, I start realizing that politics alone is not enough. There has to be something deeper. There has to be a stronger foundation, something stronger than the state. And I say to myself, there has to be a religious foundation to the state. So I'm not fully there yet, but I'm getting there, right? Okay, if we're going to have a civic nationalist state, then God should be the foundation, right? And the reason I thought this was because you can take a look at what's happening in Sweden, France, England, Germany, whatever it is. I saw that these were white countries that were once Christian. And what's happening now is they're getting replaced by Muslims. But that's not because of their skin color that I think that. I can see it because the Muslims believe in God, whereas a lot of the people in those countries don't. They're just, I don't know what they are. And so that's what happens. That's in my mind. That's what starts happening is I say, okay, there has to be a belief in God. If not, if a people group does not believe in God, then God will chastise that group of people, and he will make sure that they're put in the hands of people that do believe in something. And it happens, I mean, if you read the Old Testament, it happens all over the place. Judges, right? What happens when the people have committed evil in the eyes of God? Well, he puts them in the hands of the Philistines, right? For 40 years. Nothing new, nothing new. So, I'm getting into all this stuff. I'm looking into these people that are talking about an ethno-state, and I don't, I'm not against any of that stuff. I'm just saying that that's not enough, right? That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. It's not enough. It's not enough. I'm not against it. It's just not enough. So around this time, I stumble upon Andy Worski's channel because I see that Sargon of Akkad is debating federal agent Richard Spencer. And I've become an active watcher of Worski and JF's channel. Let me put a pause on that. During this time, meanwhile, right, I'm still going to school, and I have to take philosophy courses. And one of the courses that I have to take is an ethics course. And in this ethics course, one of the assigned readings is Fyodor Dostoevsky. Thank God. Thank God. Because I had no idea who this man was, but I can tell you right now, he changed my life. And so the assigned reading for Dostoevsky in the ethics course was The Dream of a Ridiculous Man, which is a short story. And if you haven't read it, read it. Basically, if you haven't read it, I'll just give you a really quick summary. The main character, he falls into such a deep depression and nihilism, just complete hate of the world, and not in a good way. I'm talking about like nihilistic meaninglessness, right? Emptiness. That he begins to contemplate suicide, and he buys a revolver because he wants to kill himself. And so he gets home, and while he's pondering, right, suicide and the meaninglessness and ridiculousness of his life, he falls asleep and he slips into a dream. And in the dream, he kills himself, and he finds himself at the funeral. And during the funeral, he's taken by a shadowy figure and escorted into the skies. And he's taken to like this island. And on this island, there are people that live harmoniously. There are people that live without sin. They don't know sin. They don't even know what it's like to, they can't even fathom what sin is. And so Dostoevsky here is very obviously pointing towards a pre-fall, what the pre-fall relationship of man would be if we didn't fall, right? What would have happened if we didn't fall? That's what he's resembling here. It was just, the island is pure harmony and paradise in every sense of the word among all creation. And so during his time there, just to speed up the summary, during his time there, he incites someone to sin. And when he incites that person to sin, that spreads to the rest of the island. And now they're all sinners, basically. So they're introduced to sin, and their entire community falls apart. And so he wakes up from his dream, and he's so touched and enamored by the peace and harmony that these pre-fall people were living, that he completely forgets and puts aside the idea of wanting to commit suicide. And now, because of that dream, his life is filled with meaning and love. And he promises to never stop preaching about this experience. So Amazing book, amazing book. And keep in mind, I'm reading this book during a time when I'm already opening up to the belief in God in a much more secular sense, but I'm still open to it, right? I'm already socially conservative openly. I'm getting there. I'm ready, but I'm not there. And so I didn't even know at the time that Dostoevsky was Orthodox, right? Looking back, I'm like, whoa, mind blown. It's all God's providence, right? And during this ethics course, I find myself defending his view of man and man's anthropology with set over against and arguing against Ayn Rand's virtue of selfishness writing. Completely demonic, right? If you've read it, you know what I'm talking about. And again, I don't know Dostoevsky's Orthodox at this time, but going back to what I was saying about Andy Worski's channel is that I watched the debate between JF and Jay Dyer. And during the debate, I found myself completely being annoyed by JF because I'm already, again, anti-moral relativism. Atheism annoys me. To be an atheist means to give up your land, right? This is how I'm thinking. JF's argument just completely crumbles because Jay exposes him for his arbitrariness and his self-contradictions at the meta level, right? Just a complete contradiction in the worldview. And so, again, I'm already open to believing in God. Around the same time, I begin watching other people, like Jordan Peterson, specifically, not everything, because a lot of it was just gibberish to me and really don't care. But specifically his lectures on the Bible and the symbolism in the Bible. That's how Jordan Peterson kind of served as a stepping stone into becoming interested in Scripture. At the same time, I begin watching past Steven Anderson's videos, more so because of his conservatism, not because of his Protestantism, but because of his conservatism and his openness about it. Right? I appreciated that courage, even though he's a complete lunatic. And I began watching Jay's videos right after the debate with JF, and I'm introduced to Orthodoxy. I'm like, what the heck is this, right? And then when I discovered Orthodoxy, I learned that Dostoevsky was Orthodox, and I was like, wait a minute, I'm on board with this. Like, I agree with this, right? But I'm not fully there yet. So I make it a point to start going to church. I begin going to a Baptist church just to see what it's like. I go to a Pentecostal church. I go to a Pentabaptist. I don't know what the heck you can call that. But I start going to different kinds of low church Protestant services. And immediately I'm reminded again of that experience when I was 14 or 15 years old in that evangelical church. And I got the same vibes of something off. There's something off here. It feels like a scam. It feels like someone's here to sell me something. I didn't like it. And so I start thinking about what my classmates said a couple years prior about believing what the original Christians believed. If he said, man, if you're going to revert to the original Christianity. And that came up in my mind, and I'm like, okay, so now in my mind, the only options are Roman Catholicism and Orthodoxy. And so Protestantism from the get-go was really out of the question. I didn't even consider it because I knew it wasn't what the original Christians believed. And so I'm seriously considering Roman Catholicism because of what I know, because of my Western civilization, right? This is very common, especially among the young guys. What I saw on social media when I still had it was that a lot of these guys are just Western civilization worshipers. They're not really concerned about the truth. They just think that Western civilization is based for some reason, even though it's not. But the more I read about Orthodoxy, the more I realized, like, okay, this might be it. I keep watching Jay's videos. Eventually, I want to learn what the Orthodox Church believes. And so what I end up doing is I read St. Philaret of Moscow's catechism. And I read it from beginning to end twice because I want to know what Orthodoxy believe. And let me just say that my conversion to Orthodoxy was, at that point, was very smooth. Okay, I didn't come in with a list of objections ready to one by one say, wait, but why do you believe this? Why do you believe that? Okay, but no, I know this. You teach different. I didn't have that inner conflict. And may God have mercy on those that do have that conflict. I mean, I can't even imagine being an inquirer for 3-4 years. You're out of your mind. Just make a choice. Because the way that I saw it was, okay, if Orthodoxy is the truth, then that means I have to put aside anything that I believed that is contrary to the truth. If Orthodoxy is the truth, then whatever they teach is the truth. You would think it'd be that simple. It was for me. Unfortunately, it's not for a lot of people. Anyway. One of the reasons that I rejected the Roman Catholic Church and chose Orthodoxy from the very beginning of my inquiry was because I saw where the Roman Catholic Church was going. And it was completely... The Roman Church of the first millennium is not the same church of Vatican I, and it's definitely not the same church as Vatican II. It's a completely different religion. It's not the same thing. So I was like, yeah, this doesn't even resemble what the first millennium church might have been. And Orthodoxy was very clear. Very clearly the preservers of that deposit of faith. And so finally I decided to visit an Orthodox parish, and my first service was a Vespers. And I actually cried during the Vespers, not for any emotional reason, but because I felt like everything that I had been looking for to fill the void that I had was filled. All the secular things, all the politics, all of that could be filled with this, because this is what's true and this is what's real. And so 1 year later, Chris made it into the church. But it took a long time. It took maybe another, about a year and a half. It took a while though, little by little, for me to drop all my secular and political baggage. And actually, shout out to David, because he made a good video about this weird phenomenon amongst the liberals that convert having such a hard time dropping their baggage. Why is it that the more conservative-minded ones are more ready, more open to dropping their baggage? Why is that? Well, that's because if you're conservative-minded, you're already more concerned with believing what is true. Forgive me if you're a liberal, but that's just what I believe. So I think that's why. It's because when you're a conservative, you're just really concerned about what is true. You believe in this objective truth, objective realities. And so over time, I begin to drop my secular and political baggage. This obsession over like American conservatism is dropped. And my obsession over Western civilization is dropped. I realize democracy is a waste of everyone's time. I realized the Enlightenment was a mistake. And at the beginning of my journey into Orthodoxy, right, I'm no longer a civic nationalist. At that point, I'm just straight up like Christo-fascist. I'm just extreme right wing. But eventually I dropped that as well. Now, you can see the Byzantine flag behind me. Well, I'll get that into a little bit. So, real quick, I don't want to offend anyone when I say this, but people should not prioritize politics. It's very easy as an inquirer, a catechumen, to just bring that over and kind of read your presuppositions into the faith. But it should be the other way around. It's our faith that informs how we view the world and how we treat other people. So, yeah, I just wanted to say that. And I wouldn't say I'm apathetic to politics, but there has to be a priority. And the priority is the faith. And I still believe that Orthodox Christian monarchy is the ideal form of monarchy. That's why I have the Byzantine flag, right? And so, am I still a conservative? No and yes. What do I mean by that? I'm not a conservative in the sense of the normie, basic American conservatism, because really they're just liberals. Right? Everyone knows this by now, and if you don't, get with the program, because they're just conserving liberalism. When I call myself a conservative now, is that the only thing I'm concerned about conserving is the Orthodox faith. Because that is the only true conservatism, and the only kind that really matters, because it's about eternal life. It's not about a utopia here on earth, right? And that's why I have the Byzantine flag. Not because monarchy is super based, bro. It's because the sole purpose of the empire, of the Byzantine, of the monarchy, was to preserve and conserve the faith. Okay, that was its sole purpose. And so, you know, it is what it is. But to move on, I say all that to say that my journey into Orthodoxy really was almost, not completely, but almost strictly intellectual at first. It was all about reading, but I didn't have a good discipline in prayer and fasting or anything like that. But of course, over time, the more you go to liturgy, the more you go to services, the more you partake of the sacraments, the more you start to let that intellectualism, and I don't mean that in a bad way, because being an intellectual is not bad. Being high IQ is not bad. I'm just saying that the more you're involved in the church, and when I mean involved, I mean actually going to church and partaking in the sacraments, the more you understand the orthopraxis of the faith. Not so much what we know, but what we live. Those go hand in hand. But there has to be a balance, right? Because you can't really have one without the other. If you have one without the other and there's an imbalance, then it can be unhealthy spiritually. So it's not just about being Orthodox in name, but in our lifestyle as well. And you know, the more you begin to understand orthopraxis, speaking of myself here, the more I understood orthopraxis, now the more consistent I became in my prayers and my fasting and my spiritual reading. And when I say spiritual reading, I'm speaking specifically, no, not specifically, I take that back. I'm not just talking about high-level theology, right? I'm talking about like spiritual edification, like the lives of the saints. By the way, the lives of the saints should be mandatory reading for all inquirers and catechumens before anything else. That's just my opinion. And I could be wrong, this is just my opinion. But the reason I say that the lives of the saints should be the first thing that is given to inquirers and catechumens is because it lays a good foundation. You know, of course, with catechetical teachings, right? Lives of the saints should be of utmost importance. Because, by the way, if you want to read the lives of the saints, try reading St. Nikolai Velimirovich's prologue, the prologue of Orid. And if you can't get a hard copy because it's expensive, get the PDF and do a daily reading of it. Every day, just read the daily writing. And you will see over time how that really just strengthens you. It strengthens your faith. It really does. And actually, shout out to St. Nikolai because he's my favorite saint. He's not my patron saint, but he's my favorite saint. And I guess my advice to any inquirers or catechumens would be to read the lives of the saints. And if you can get your hands on the prologue, whether it's PDF or hard copy, try incorporating that into your prayers. Make it part of your morning prayer ritual. It's very important to know the lives of the saints. Okay? Because what good is it for an inquirer and a catechumen or a catechumen to read St. Maximus's disputations with Pyrrhus and St. Gregory of Palamas's triads if they're not even praying or fasting? And all they're doing is arguing with people on Twitter or Discord. That is... Stop. I'm telling you. And I'm speaking from experience. Man, I had to learn the hard way, trust me. So, in retrospect, right, my experience with New Ageism, right, looking back now, with a much more clear mind, is that my experience with New Ageism really opened my eyes to spiritual realities. And these spiritual realities that are emphasized in the Orthodox Church, because of my prior experiences, it made it much more easy for me to accept the spiritual realities of the Orthodox Church. I didn't have a problem believing the miraculous stories in the lives of the saints. I didn't have a problem believing the miracles of the Church. I didn't have a problem with the doctrine of the toll houses and the soul after death. All this stuff was easy for me to accept because, again, if the Orthodox Church is the truth, then what it teaches is the truth. Sorry, not sorry. And other things too, hesychastic tradition, right? All of that stuff, I was very open to accept that with ease. So my, by the way, what was I going to say? Right, I was going to say that New Ageism, what I experienced was actually spiritual, right? Quote unquote spiritual. But it was a misdirected spirituality. Obviously, because it's self-centered and at its root, it's demonic. But because of that experience, it kind of paved the way for the true spiritual realities, right? The ones that we should be experiencing. And thank God for Father Seraphim Rose as well, because who's very near and dear to my heart, because he was basically the nail in the coffin during my conversion to Orthodoxy, because of his writings like Nihilism, Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future, The Soul After Death, all of that was like a punch in the face, a spiritual punch in the face. Like, wow, like, okay, this is what, now it all makes sense. That's how I felt, right? Now it all makes sense. Everything that I had experienced before is all answered and addressed in a lot of his writings. And so, thank God for the righteous Father Seraphim Rose. Thank God for him, right? So yeah, I mean, that's where I am now, and don't have any social media, but I have this channel, and really my goal for this channel is to just read the writings of the church fathers and the saints that might not be so readily available to some listeners, and hoping that they might serve as spiritual food and spiritual edification. Every now and then, I'll give my own take on things, but I make it a point not to do that. I just don't like doing it. I do enjoy making movie analyses, though. Those are fun. Because I like to take a deep dive into pop culture and see what I can analyze through an Orthodox Christian lens and worldview. But yeah, I mean, that's what I'm doing now. I just want to read the writings of the Church and the Fathers, so that people might not have to buy and waste money if they don't have access to books as easily. Then hopefully my channel can help them. And I don't really seek to gain anything from this channel, because I'm not doing anything to except reading. Like, that's all I'm doing, and every now and then give you my opinion. But I'd like to take the time now to give a thanks to Jay Dyer, a special shout out to Jay Dyer, because of his, his help in my conversion, and other people too, even though I was already converted. By the time Deacon Ananias made a channel, go check him out. David, shout out to David, Orthodox Shahada, Ubi Petrus, all these guys are doing great work, and they deserve donations and money and all that stuff. And then other people for spiritual edification, like Father Cosmas on Orthodox Talks, Father Spiridon Bailey, Father Josiah Trenum on Patristic Nectar, Father Peter Hears. All these are great Orthodox channels. And if you're Hispanic and looking into Orthodoxy, and you have Spanish-speaking family members that you might want to introduce to Orthodoxy, there's a channel called Ortodoxia Latam, and I'll link all these channels, which you guys probably already follow anyway. But I'll include that one for the Spanish speakers, because he does all his videos strictly in Spanish, so that might help. So yeah, I went on a rant there for a little bit at the end that had nothing to do with my conversion, but that was my conversion story. And I wanted to share that with you guys, because I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of people that can relate to what I'm saying. And they might not agree with everything that I just said, especially the more politically minded. But I just wanted to share my story, and wanted to share my journey. So thank you guys for watching. Thank you for listening. May God bless you all. Have a good day.